Welcome to U.S. Notes 6.4. These are going to be about Bill Clinton's presidency from 1992 to 2000. So those are the years we're looking at. Clinton is our 42nd president of the United States, right between George Bush Sr. and George Bush Jr., I guess we'll call him. So George H.W. Bush and George W. Bush. Clinton comes between those. He serves the 8 years in between those two. Now, under Reagan, we talked about conservatism, and we said that Bush continued Reagan's policies. So Bush, being Republican, having been Reagan's vice president, continued those conservative policies. Now, liberalism is something that Clinton brings. So this is really what's tied to the Democratic beliefs. So a lot of times Democrats are liberals. And so this idea, this belief that government should take an active role in the economy and social programs, but they should not dictate social behavior. That's really going to be your liberal or liberalist view. So that's what Clinton's going to bring, where in the conservatism, it was really kind of government should not be actively involved in the economy and society. So those were kind of our two different ideas. So we defined liberalism here for you, so make sure you know that. Also, there is a huge impact in this election with minority voters. So in 1992, there was actually an increase in the number of minority voters who actually turned out and voted. So young people, Hispanics, African Americans, more of those people turned out to vote. And more of those people tend to register Democrat than older white voters. So that actually did impact the election. So between the three-way election in 92 with Perot, Bush, and Clinton, that helped Clinton win. And then Clinton kept that momentum, and the Democrats kept that momentum in 96 because of this new group of voters. So Clinton, as president, what did he do? What were some of his policies? Well, first, let's look at his domestic policies, or the policies within the United States. He had this thing called NAFTA. Look, we have NAFTA things. NAFTA stands for North American Free Trade Agreement. And here we go with North America. The U.S., Canada, and Mexico have had an agreement with one another. In 1994, they created this agreement that they would trade freely and not tax one another for any goods that are traded between the three countries. So this was an economic policy designed to help increase trade, stimulate the economy, and help things get better. Remember, one of the reasons Bush did not get reelected was the economy was bad and people were upset about the deficit. I believe it was $132 billion that they were looking at. Well, Clinton actually managed to balance the budget. Yes, I really said it. He balanced it. What we spent and what we brought in actually matched up under Clinton. In 95, 96, 97, and then in 98, he did something absolutely crazy. He had a surplus. We actually brought in more money than we spent in our country in 1998. That's unheard of in our history. So Clinton, you can see, very popular economically, fiscally responsible. People like that. He also is responsible for welfare reform. There was some big welfare reform that happened in 1996. So here you go. On this side, you have some things that happened. So mandatory work, time limit benefits. So you could only get benefits for so long if you were on welfare. No new job training money. Cap the block grant, you don't have to worry about that. Tougher child support, so if you owed child support and you were on welfare, they were going to take that child support out of there. Pregnancy prevention and teen parent requirements. They really started to crack down on some things, and people really supported this. They liked that they felt like their money was not going to waste, going to support deadbeats. And welfare caseloads declined. So you can actually see 1996, I can't quite hit 96 with this, but you can see the decline in welfare caseloads because of this welfare reform. So people would see that as being very successful, this welfare reform in 96. In 96, Clinton also attempted healthcare reform. Yes, you heard me, healthcare reform. It failed. In fact, his wife, Hillary Clinton, was the one who pushed for the healthcare reform. So she was in charge of it. It failed to pass. But again, this is another time where healthcare reform was brought up and attempted prior to our most recent pieces. So this is an ongoing attempt throughout history. We saw it all the way back with Teddy Roosevelt, and now we're seeing it in 96 with Clinton. So it sounds like Clinton was doing pretty well. Well, he had some challenges too in his presidency. Some challengers, Newt Gingrich being his most famous challenger. The conservatives really had a comeback in the 94 election. So a couple of years into Clinton's presidency, he was struggling a little bit. At this point, he didn't have a balanced budget and things like that. And Newt Gingrich and the conservatives came up with this contract with America and the things they would do for America to help them, and ran on that platform and actually took control of the House of Representatives again in 96. This became an issue because, or 94, I'm sorry, in 94. This becomes an issue because they maintain control of the House, and they are able to bring charges against Clinton to impeach him. So in 1998, Clinton is impeached. So the way this works, this is one of the things he's most famous for. The House of Representatives brings the charges. So they investigate and decide there's enough to charge Clinton with a crime. The crime being twofold: perjury and obstruction of justice. So they charge him with the crime. Then the Senate hears the case. So the information is brought forth, the Senate hears the case, and they decide what happened. So here we can see some pictures that went along with it. So the Senate decides, is Clinton guilty or not? Clinton was actually found not guilty on both counts. The perjury and obstruction of justice actually had to do with lying under oath, mostly about having an affair during an investigation into an entirely different issue that had to do with when he had been governor of Arkansas. So this happened, this impeachment, and we have only had 2 presidents who have been impeached. Nixon was threatened with impeachment but resigned. And the other one is Andrew Johnson after the Civil War. So 2 presidents, 20 years apart, both being impeached or threatened with impeachment. More disillusionment with the federal government by most Americans. People really don't trust the government. Who can you trust? They lie about everything. Should this be happening? And so it really changes the relationship, or continues to change the relationship, between Americans and the federal government. So outside of the impeachment, Clinton's domestic policies were really pretty successful. The impeachment towards the end of his presidency, towards the end of his second term, really tainted his presidency. So foreign policies, he really focused on human rights. And this was a really important thing at the time. In 92 to 95, there was a civil war in Bosnia. And this was an area that the Soviet Union had broken apart, and they had gained independence, and you actually had 2 different groups fighting for control, and essentially a genocide. These are bodies from the war. These are prisoners. You can see these prisoners. So horrible civil war. And so the U.S. plan, we really had to figure out, how do we deal with these human rights violations, and what's our plan? What does America do? So first in Bosnia, because it was the earliest one we had to deal with, we generally tried to keep ground troops out. We used air support and missiles from off the coast to help support and try to stop it. Well, that didn't really work. So in Somalia, the U.S. got involved in 1993, so our involvement in Bosnia really started in 92. 1993, Somalia happened, and we decided, well, let's try something different. So maybe you've seen the movie Black Hawk Down. That is actually about Somalia in 1993. So Somalia fell to a civil war in 93. Terrible, terrible war. And as you saw, we tried to, if you saw the movie, we tried to send in military support. And it got so bad, we actually had to pull our troops out. So we actually withdrew troops from Somalia. Somalia became anarchy for years, and even today is still a really dangerous place to be. So the U.S. tried send missiles, but no troops. Send troops. Neither one of those worked. So 94, we had another chance in Rwanda. And many of you guys saw Hotel Rwanda as freshmen in your geography classes, and you saw the civil war and the genocide in Rwanda between the Hutus and the Tutsis. And in this case, the U.S. said, you know what? We sent in troops, it didn't work. We sent in missiles, it didn't work. We're just not going to get involved. And you had a genocide happen, or an attempted genocide happen, and that didn't work either. So we realized none of these was really the way to work. So we were kind of a failure at our civil rights, our human rights mission, but we were trying different things, trying to figure it out, and we were still working on it. We just couldn't figure out what really works. And in the Middle East, Clinton continued peace talks between Israel and Palestine. Actually, in '93, he had set up a peace agreement. It was tentative. Then we had bombings, so it didn't work. Brought the leaders together again in '98. That failed because there were some suicide bombings and things that happened during those talks. So he continued to try to work on peace in the Middle East, talks and getting the two sides to agree. Another big topic that's going to tie into the Middle East happens in 1993. In 1993, under Clinton's administration, we have the World Trade Center bombing. And you might be like, what? I don't know about this. There was a bomb. This was kind of how some earlier bombings worked. A truck full of explosives was parked in the underground parking garage of the World Trade Center by Middle Eastern terrorist groups. They exploded the bomb. Here at the top you can see some of the wreckage. The bottom here is some of the aftermath. And killed several people. It was an attempt to take down the entire building. That attempt failed, but it was very destructive, and it was an attack on U.S. soil by a Middle Eastern terrorist group. And so that really starts, we've had these issues with Iran, we've had issues with Libya, so we have this history there, and now we're seeing terrorism happening in the U.S. and kind of change.